Okay, hello, welcome to the security slot here, at the CodeFs meeting. I'm very glad that we had the time and also a slot for you to also talk about security, especially because in our environment, security is pretty important. Because even the slightest change to the current environment or the current systems that we operate and create could have a very severe and major impact on all of us. And all of that means also the community that we want to build trust in. So that's why I want to talk a little bit about security in general, which is we have timed it very nicely because it's right after lunch, and usually security is a heavy topic, and today we're just talking about it in a very high level format because we're talking about processes. I know most people don't like processes because they seem so strict, but we can take processes as we already do them in a more fussy, flexible way and make the best out of it. The idea of this is, in the end, to also build trust in ourselves, to show other people that we care about security, especially if we are proposing something that's going to change the system. So it's basically, so let's just quickly jump to who I am, because I'm fairly new to the whole system. My name is Martin. I usually go by the handle TintinWeb, so when you find anything about me, it's usually vulnerabilities and security stuff. I come from the information security side and recently joined also all these blockchain things. So that's why I'm very glad that I see lots of potential that we can apply things that we already do in the information security space, also to the blockchain side. Things that I did in the past include working on the EVM bytecode yourself, helping fuzz stuff, creating tools for that, creating libraries that help other people create tools to fuzz the EVM state machine, for example, but also high-level tools for contracts developers and other things. So if you're curious, just check out the GitHub repository. I think there's something for everyone in there. Yeah. So let's talk about the EIP workflow. I refer to the workflow as it is specified in the EIP 1 also to it's a process in that sense. So there's some input, there's something that's going to be done, and there's output, and there's multiple steps inside. I'm not sure how familiar all of us or all of you are with the EIP workflow itself, but I guess since this is a CodeF meeting, everyone should be pretty familiar with it. But we will still revisit that so that we get on the same understanding on how the workflow should work. And I guess that you could even teach me there a little bit because I'm new to the process and you guys are already doing this. You're proposing all these changes to systems, to specifications. And I think we can work together on making this process more secure, make sure that all the relevant information is available for people in that process in time. So I drew up a nice chart, which is not very visible in here, but maybe likely on the stream. There's this, as it is called in the EIP, in EIP 1, there's a champion or someone who has an idea. An idea could be a change, could be something new, could be removing something. It's something to be an input to the change management system that we have to form a consensus about what we want to have as a community in our ecosystem. This author has an idea and writes up tries to vet this idea and gets more people into the same boat, and then just to test whether this is something that might be successful as a proposal to change something in the ecosystem. Once this is done, this can be filed with the EIP GitHub repository, and until that it will be work in progress. But at that point, once it is filed and it went through that initial quality gate, which is I depicted it as the EIP editor, as a policeman for that process, because it's only checking formally whether information is ready and whether this is something that can be fit for a change for the future. Once this is past this gate, the EIP is considered to be in draft state. In draft state means you can work on this, you can refine it, you can make it mature enough so that it can be a valid change in the end. Like Dimitri already said, you should, for example, provide test cases with that. You should also have a whole lot of other things that we will show on one of the later slides in that process ready so that other people in the process can jump on it, can do their due diligence, and can make sure that we do the best thing for all of us. Once you feel like you're sufficiently worked on that, and not only you feel that, but also all people that are involved in that, and all people always means like everyone in here and also anyone who has a stake in that system. Once the proposal is in a state that it can be, that is ready for an implementation, if it's an implementation change, or ready to be applied if it's something that is changing a process or something, then you can put it in a last call mode. This is like the last review period where someone can still raise some concerns if there is something. There's two different kinds of, well, there's many different kinds of EIPs, but in that process, there's two different ones that have an effect on the stages in that process, which is you can have a core EIP, which is something changing on the consensus layer, or is something that is directly directed to the core devs, like you all in here, and also remote. And there can also, an EIP can also just be informational or changing a process, then this step, for example, is just skipped. The step that is just shown here is, let's assume that we have a core EIP because it might have a very major impact if something is going wrong or the specification is wrong or the design has some issues. In that case, after the last call, this EIP is being published and people can review it publicly. And also core devs are going to try to implement it, or better, not yet try to implement it, but to find a decision whether they want to implement it first. This is not part of the EIP process. It is something that I want to find out more about because I couldn't find any information about how core devs actually agree to implement stuff. Because this is one of the most important things then out there, because this is the last security gate in that process where we can still make sure that a change that might have a drastic effect on the software, for example, is not being accepted. Once that is done and this change is implemented by at least, like the EIP says, at least 3 core ecosystem clients or something in that direction, it is going to be in the final state, and final state just says like, this is state of the art, this is what is out there already, what is released. So what we see here is, this is something that helps us like plan change management. Is kind of, or we can see it from a change management perspective, because we want to avoid that a change that is introduced is going to have consequences for any one of us. So there is also some other studies which, like, an EIP can be deferred if it's like not yet the right time to have it in a hard fork, for example, for core EIPs. It can be rejected at some of these stages. It can be active if it's not meant to be updated or updated long, or it can be superseded if someone is going to like change an EIP and replace it with another one. Yeah, since we were talking about like a process in the beginning, we need some inputs to that. So the input is the idea, and the idea should have like a valid form as described in the EIP one. What I did here is like, if we pan from this to the left, we see like there's, on the right side, this is the guy that has the idea. On the very left side, this is the minimum, or not the minimum requirements, but the required information that we want to have in an EIP. Some of them are minimum requirements, so they have to be there, like the preamble, it's just like for meta information. A simple summary so that any one of you guys can go to like read an EIP and see like, oh, this is going to happen there within 1 or 2 sentences. An abstract is clear, motivation, why are you doing this? Specification, this is all the technical details, all the bits that are going to move and stuff. The rationale about that is more the motivation supporting the specification. Then there can be backward compatibility information in there. There can be, as Dimitri also mentioned, test cases in there that should be implemented, because you, as that instance is going to propose change, you might already have like a good idea about what should be in there. Then implementations, this is going to be to end up or is already implemented, and yeah, the copyright waiver. Other things that are important is there's different kinds of EIPs. So there's meta EIP, which is usually changing the process itself or other processes that we have in our community. Informational EIPs, something you want to communicate to anyone that doesn't have a direct effect on the ecosystem. And standard track EIPs. These are the most important ones because they mostly, in most cases, they result in some changes to the software to happen. They can be split up more in core EIPs. They are very likely to require a hard fork, a consensus change, or is something that wants to be, like as I said, communicated with the core devs. There can be interface changes or interface proposals, for example, for the RPC interface. Then there is network changes, the peer-to-peer layer in that case, or ERC or application layer changes itself. By the way, if there's any questions, please just go ahead and ask them right away because it's way easier to handle it this way. So what we have so far is this the whole process, the whole stages that you can have your proposal in. You have the idea, and that in that case, a core EIP is going to move from phase to phase. Okay, one thing that you might also have spotted is that we're talking about security, but until now there was no explicit. Nothing ever explicitly mentioned security in that process, right? So how are you going to make sure that people actually address security in all these changes? Remember, the change management itself is very important. You can mess up lots of things with minor changes, and it's very hard to, let's put it that way, it is harder to create safe software or secure software compared to finding vulnerabilities in that software. So that's the thing that we are fighting against, more or less. Let's just think through it. There was no security explicitly mentioned there, but what if we would change that? So what if at the very beginning, let's say from an engineering perspective in the requirements engineering phase already, requirements engineering and design phase, we would already collect security information. So someone of you guys is going to propose like new opcodes in the EVM or changing the hashing mechanism for like to be more ASIC resistant, for example. It would already be great if like the instance is going to propose the change already thought about security implications of that. And most likely, and in almost all cases, all of you already thought about the security implications, but sometimes they are buried deep in the specifications or in other sections of the EIP, which makes it especially hard for security guys like me or other companies, for example, that would like to help out the ecosystem reviewing changes from a security perspective, because we would have to invest lots of time into finding out what are you actually doing there, which is not very technical but high level, but still has all the security information in there so that I can triage for myself whether I need to look at that or whether I spend my time better on something else which is more critical to the ecosystem. So what if we had that information in the first place in that requirement design phase already? What if that information would travel with the EIP, with the document that is like moving, like in software development, like you have a ticket or an epic or something, and you move along the security information with that epic through all stages until the software is released? What if we do that also in the EIP process? We would have like the first security gate, which is the EIP editor, and the EIP editor is only, like they're formally responsible to make sure that people adhere to the process and stuff, but they might look into the details as well, but they could just reject stuff if it's not in the same form that we want to have it. So what if we allow them to reject any proposal that doesn't consider security at any point. Because we want people, or we want the guys who are proposing the change to already consider security in their designs, in their requirements and stuff. So EIP editor could already reject proposals that do not significantly deal with the security implications of that. We could move it along. It is in draft. The community can comment on it, can verify what is going on there. People can step in and see like, there's a new EIP. Someone is proposing, let's take that change the hashing algorithm case. Someone's proposing that. Someone knows someone else who's good with hardware and stuff and is going to like add more information on that, why this is from a security perspective with hardware background, why it's a good idea or why it's a bad idea. You could collect this information and just move it along until we have like the last call where people are like, they say like, it's finished, we can have this final review, we don't have to do all the steps that we already did before again because we already have the information. There's some things that might still be open that we have to check, but lots of other things that we already checked and verified and say like, okay, this is okay. And at some point it will be at the codef's tables and will be decided whether they would whether they accept the risk or whether they want to implement that based on the risk that is attached to that change. Because this is what you want to do in the end. You want to have a trade-off if there's any risk attached to that and see like how risky is it for me to really push that out. And yeah, nobody wants to like, oh, sorry. Okay, we are back now. Yeah, so there is another security gate once it is accepted. Once it is in final state, it's already rolled out, and it's very hard to get any changes back that are already out there that create problems. We had that in the past, and we don't want to have that in the future. Another thing to mention, what you see in that small box up there is just a picture about like an agile development process, but it should depict that development is going on in all of these phases until just before the final one. The important part there is usually for high-risk software development cases, you should have enough, you should choose a secure development process as well, which is unlikely to be found in very many companies because you need lots of people to do that actually. But this is something we can all work together and also take parts from these secure software development processes and maybe also put them into the EIP itself. You all might now think like, okay, I'm going to write an EIP and then I will have like a big booklet of additional instructions and things and security considerations, and this will just like be an overkill for me. This is not the idea of this. The idea is if you have if you know how to like treat this from a security perspective, you can already add that information. If you don't know, also feel free to just note it in there and wait for other people to step in, because it's still better to raise that issue that you need someone else to review that part instead of just silently drop it somewhere. Okay, so what we propose, and we posted this on the ETH Magicians forum already, is that we add a mandatory security considerations section to the EIP itself. A mandatory means if you have an EIP, a change that has no security considerations whatsoever, keep that section in that EIP, state why it's not security, why there is no security implication, and you're done. It's just a one-liner in that case. There's many of them that might fall into that category, but it's way better to keep it in so that we have one form that we can check about it and then move along. If you have more information, just place it there, but just make sure that like the security section should not be like the main part of your proposal. Like, yeah. Other things we can already do, like from a risk management perspective, which is also important because in the end we are releasing software, or all of you guys are releasing software, and other people are helping to make sure that there's not so much risk left when this is going to be released. We can already look at the EIP categories. And maybe you might already find it. Like, let's just ask you guys, for an informational EIP, what do you think? Like, what is the risk that could be there? Like, how high would it be in T-shirt sizes of low, medium, or high?
Low, or zero.
Zero or low, unless there is someone pushing out some false information that might misdirect people. For the meta EIP, for example, remember this is changing the process itself or other processes in that thing.
Same, low.
It can even be a little bit higher than low, because if you change the process to remove security things, then it's like it's already a problem, right? But it's something. If I would look at it and I would participate in a security triage for hard forks, for example, I would check, is it an informational EIP? Risk probably low, likelihood of something introducing something that is very significantly impacting us all, also low. Let's just, yeah, there's other priorities right now. For the standard track EIPs, that's a bit higher. For example, for the core EIP, yeah, consensus stuff, pretty high, almost always an issue. For interfaces, can be high, because we can have insecure interfaces like we find in many minor softwares with admin consoles and stuff. This is almost always pretty insecure. Networking layer or the ESC itself, like someone proposing an interface that is by design insecure already because, for example, it's receiving personal data, for example, or something in that direction. Yeah, but I, for myself, in a security triage, would likely look at these core EIPs first, because like this is always a time trade-off. There's lots of proposals going on. So let's quickly zip through the benefits so that we can see like what can we do with it actually. We already talked about that case. We want to encourage every one of you and everyone who's going to offer EIPs in the future to consider the security already very early in there. We know that you're already considering this, and most of you also describe it in that EIP, but it should be very visible in there as well, so that people that are coming from a different direction, for example, that they can quickly jump on an EIP and see like, ah, yeah, this is something I want to, or I can contribute something to. We want to raise visibility for security in general and surface the risk early in that stage. An important part is to spark discussions about all of this. Yeah, allow the community to challenge assumptions that are already stated in there. So like if you're stating this has no security implications, people might want to jump on that and say like, oh, but there is a case that you didn't consider why this is something, and then you can just add that to that, so that the people that are implementing this at the later stage, that they have that information ready as well, and that they can also use this while creating a secure implementation of it. Yeah, easy access, we already talked about that. It's a very important part. Risk management, I also kind of flipped through that. The idea behind risk management in general is that at one point before you release, you have all the necessary information ready so that you know, like, is this something I can release at that state? Is there residual risk that is left there? How do we treat the risk? Or is there something else that we haven't considered yet? Yeah, there's also a chance for EIPs to be, like, go through the whole process, be in final stage, but there was no significant security review for some reason, because everyone is depending on someone else, and like if many people are working together in a peer-to-peer network, there might be the case where only a very subset of people are looking at something, and that might slip through and end up in the next release, for example. Yeah, and one very important point is this information, if done right, can be input for many other follow-up activities. Not only the ones that are in the process, but if you think about, if at the end we get to a point, if you have to do the hard fork triage in that way, and you see there's still risk for that case that a hashing mechanism, for example, is being changed, and you cannot assess that risk yourself and you need someone else, you already have information that you can give this entity to actually assess that risk themselves, or to make sure that this is tested. For example, for very, very helpful, this information is very helpful for scoping exercises on changes, for example. Okay, how do we get there? Pretty easy and straightforward. We propose a two-step approach, and we are just mimicking here something that is already out there that I will come to in the later slide. First stage will be, or is what we propose is to have mandatory security consideration in the document itself, adjust the process that EIP editors are allowed to reject EIPs that do not have this section or do not provide any note about anything in there. This is the first stage, and this will be very, very relaxed. So you, like, if there is at least, if the editor sees that you at least dealt with it, it's already fine, like pass it along, because we all learn from this process and we're going to improve that anyway. And the second part is, I know that it's very hard for, often very hard for non-security people to actually get an idea on what should they actually write in that section. It is not always trivial to do, so we also propose to get some people together and start writing some guidance for the security consideration section itself. And this doesn't, it sounds easy, but it might be like a bit more effort that we need to put out. So in the end, these security considerations, they could have information like, they could provide means to establish common grounds, same, so that when it use the same names for the same things and talking about the same parts. We could outline basic security goals of Ethereum. There's already a wiki article in the Ethereum GitHub repository that can be used for that. Like, what is the basic security things that we want to preserve? There can be common threats and risks. This is something you usually want to have security people also in the boat so that they help you, like, you show the environment and the architecture, and we put the security stickers on these interfaces and stuff. And we can share that with the community. So whenever someone is writing, someone is proposing a change to like some part of the whole system, they can read up that section in there and see like, these are the assumptions. Yeah, and this guidance should give further guidance to write them, and also provide some examples so that you can copy paste stuff and change things. Way easier to, like, instead of coming up with this yourself. What you keep in mind, keep it simple, as we have said, don't make like a master's thesis out of it. Avoid duplicating information, reference stuff in the EIP if you need to do that. Always think about who is the target audience. Think about the information you might need in later stages. Always focus on the change. Don't try to describe like the current system and the next system and all the other systems. Focus on the change. At some point, if everyone is focusing on the change, we will have enough information to do differential security analysis on this. You don't have security implications, just state why there is no security implications. Yeah, and this is something I actually wanted to ask you guys. What information could be valuable for you down the road to also have in that section? We already thought about, like, for scoping purposes, for priority purposes, so that we know, like, this is something we need to have people look at, and this is the scope for this, and things like that. Yeah, this is something we already talked about. Another important thing is, like, outline, if possible, how this affects all the various layers in the ecosystem. And the various layers is, there's also, I think, Joseph filed an EIP some years ago about, like, establishing a layer model, like an OSI layer model, but just for Ethereum. Could at some point make sense, because it helps you quickly understand, like, how are things working together. And then also outline threats and risks to that, so that you can think of, this can happen in that cases, and maybe find some new edge cases. Also important, if you propose something and you're a super guru in Java, for example, and you can give guidance down the road to core devs or to other people to avoid certain things or make certain things, or there's certain pitfalls in there, state them, because it will be valuable for other people. Yeah, we can drive this even further. So if you have a software development lifecycle, and this one is like a secure one, you can, or there are many secure software development life cycles. You can take things they already have in their process and maybe think about like, would it make sense to state that in the EIP? For example, quality, security gate stuff, risk assessment. We know this is all security people things, but if we have guidance on how to do this efficiently with minimal information, I think this can be done. One of the most important things is threat modeling, but also often forgotten incidents response. Like we're changing a hash algorithm. Okay, what if something goes very wrong? If you have an idea ready, state it there. If you don't have an idea, but you feel like it's important, state it there. And then people can jump in and we can make sure together that once we release this change and like shit hits the fan, we don't like run around having our like hands over our head in crazy chicken head off mode. Yeah, so this was a process. Remember there's development involved. You should probably also look at your development processes and maybe see like, where can I put security in that places? It's almost never like an overkill to put at least minimal security due diligence in there if you just think about at least adjust the change management process you guys have and just always rate this change is going to introduce risk or not. And then you can decide something. It's better to have that information than not. Risk assessment we'll talk about. Another thing that is important, there's already discussions going on besides the EIP, which is in many cases on GitHub or on some forums and stuff. But it's not easy for people like me, for example, that want to look at the security implications to get an idea of what discussions have already started and what is the outcome of these. If you started discussions and you already know this is a non-issue or this is an issue, but we accept it, state it in there because it's super easy for new people to just see like, okay, yeah, this is what is already going on. Yeah, and where did we got this from? Like, this is not rocket science. So, and also like we just borrowed it from other systems. The EIP system is based on the Python PEP system, and Python already has it. There's a security implications section in there. RFC has it since 1993. This is how they initially required it, and this is the same that we are proposing. Just make sure there is a section and that you at least deal with that topic so that other people can help and jump in and that we can improve on that in the future. They also have a security considerations guideline from 2003, which is just exact the thing that we were proposing. Like, what is the goals in our ecosystem? What is the threat model in very general architectural threat model, not application stuff and detailed things, common issues, and yeah, how to do things. And yeah, it's still in there. I checked it. And yeah, what they do is like to say, make sure you deal with the topic and here's more information on how to do it. That's basically it. And yeah, thank you for it.
So what's the number of your EIP?
There is no number yet. It's still in the work in progress phase.
Right, but you've got an issue or a pull request?
I got an issue. I will file a pull request for it because I already changed all the documents and the templates and stuff. So it's just to be discussed and in some case, at some point. I will just post it on the